Welcome to the West Ham Voice on a Sunday evening. I hope you're all doing well. Day after the game against Nottingham Forest, another defeat, and another defeat in a manner that we kind of don't want to become accustomed to, but it's becoming all too familiar. If you're new to the channel, please do hit the subscribe button. If you're new or an existing subscriber, or if you're just passing through and you appreciate and like the content, then please do hit the like button, because when you hit the like button, the algorithms in YouTube sort of do their business, and the video and the channel gets elevated. So, what are we going to discuss? Well, pretty obvious what we're going to discuss, isn't it? Now, I want to take you back a little bit, back in time, and tell you a little story. Because it's quite relevant to today. After escaping another relegation battle in the summer of 2018, the West Ham board made what seemed to be a bold decision by not sticking to a traditional type of manager at West Ham. They didn't stay with David Moyes after he'd saved them from relegation. And instead, they went for a manager who, on paper, seemed to have an excellent pedigree. After all, Manuel Pellegrini, he'd won the Ecuadorian Championship, the Argentinian Championship twice with two different teams, San Lorenzo de Almagro and River Plate. He won the Argentinian Super Cup with San Lorenzo. He won the Chilean Cup with Universidad. And of course, he was the winner of the League Cup twice, as well as the Premier League champion winner with Manchester City. He had a pedigree, and many fans felt perhaps this was a turning point. You know, maybe we were lucky to get such a manager of such stature. The board basically knee-jerked, didn't they? Because of the protests that happened after all the failed promises of why we moved from the Boleyn ground to the London Stadium. You know, we didn't move just to find ourselves perpetually in relegation battles, which is what we just experienced in the end of that season. We moved because we were promised things like Champions League football. And so Pellegrini seemed to be, to the board at least, to be the man to lead us to that promised land. He was given a massive war chest of around 100 odd million pounds, and off he went with his technical director, Mario Husilos, to buy some pretty decent footballers out there in Europe. Out went the old, with the likes of James Collins, Sam Byram, Jordan Hugill, that fantastic striker that we had, Czech Kuarte, and in came new signings such as Felipe Anderson for something like 38 odd million pounds. Is a Diop at the back, 25 million, a player that was much sought after by some clubs around Europe, apparently. I think it was Man United that may have wanted him. Sound familiar with a defender that we got this summer who Man United wanted? Anyway, Andrei Yarmolenko came in for 20 million. Lucas Fabianski came in goal. But there was also no shortage of pretty dud signings as well. Lucas Perez, who arrived from Arsenal for something like £4 million. The crocked Jack Wilshere and Samir Nasri, who both arrived on free transfers. And of course, our midfield engine, a 32-year-old Colombian defensive midfielder in Carlos Sanchez. So in a way, it was a mix of old, new, experienced. And I remember quite vividly how excited we all were. You know, we smashed the transfer window. Sound familiar? Back then. And the first season, to be quite honest with you, was okay. We finished, 9th, 10th, something like that in the league. And many fans were reasonably content. It seemed to be going in the right direction. Hey, we didn't at least experience yet another relegation battle. And then the second season under Pellegrini, was to prove the pivots, really, the pivot point where we take a major step into European football. We thought that's what was going to happen after finishing content, pretty decent, mid-table finish. We were going to push on. More money was spent in the next summer, where we bought Sebastian Haller and Pablo Fornals with a combined cost of something like £70 million. This was it. Europe was beckoning. Instead, it started to look like an unmitigated disaster. And by December of 2019, Pellegrini and his vision had gone. Back came David Moyes, and rest is history. Again, he saved us from relegation and then proceeded to oversee 3 seasons of success as well as European football, etc., until he left in the summer of 2024. Now, whilst I finally agreed that it was time for David Moyes to go, there's no doubt about it. To be honest, he could have easily have saved his job, David Moyes, if he hadn't been so stubborn with his approach, with his tactics, with his team selections, and so on. It could have been so much different. But anyway, history now seems to have come full circle, because when David Moyes left in June, the club announced that Julen Lopetegui was to be our first new head coach of West Ham United. No longer do we have a manager, we have a head coach. And our first ever head coach would work alongside technical director Tim Steidten to bring in yet another new dawn at West Ham. Now, with 12 games gone in all competitions, we've just 4 wins, 2 draws, and 6 defeats, of which 5 of those defeats are in the Premier League. Now, look, Lopetegui was held by some. You've only got to look at the Twitter accounts and the videos and various other messages that were out there at the time. He was considered as some to be, the person that was going to change our fortunes again, bring us back into European football, having not had it for 1 season last season. But now that all seems pretty much, sorry, not last season, but this season itself. But now that all seems like a bit of a joke, really. European football couldn't be further from the truth. Alongside technical director Tim Steidten, Lopetegui and Steidten have spent something like £140 million in the transfer market, probably the equivalent to the 100 million of 5-6 years ago. A virtually new backline, an exciting attacking winger in Crescencio Somerville. But similar mistakes were made to those of the Pellegrini era, where we brought in, free and aging central midfielder, for example, Guido Rodriguez, our modern day Carlos Sanchez. Is that unfair? Is Rodriguez better than Sanchez? I don't know. Perhaps he is a little bit, and I'm being unfair to Rodriguez. But also, bringing in injury-prone players. Nicholas Fulkrug, our modern day Jack Wilshere. The similarities go on. Just like Pellegrini, Lopetegui has won trophies. And just like Pellegrini, Lopetegui has Premier League experience, which is what the board wants. But alas, unlike Pellegrini, at least under him, we had one half-decent season before it all went pear-shaped in the second season of Pellegrini's tenure. Lopetegui has kind of bypassed the first good season, hasn't he? He's gone straight for the pear-shape. So what on earth is going on at West Ham? What is going wrong? Well, we have to start back to when Lopetegui was one of several candidates for the job of head coach. And the board interviewed him and others to replace David Moyes. It's now well documented that the board interviewed Ruben Amorim as well. And it's pretty obvious that Lopetegui, and although I didn't want to admit it before, is clearly the cheaper, or was clearly the cheaper option. £3.5 million salary, no compensation to pay any other team because Lopetegui was out of work. That sounds familiar as well, doesn't it, with Pellegrini? Pellegrini was just finishing his contract over in China, so he was coming in. Mind you, he came in on a pretty hefty wage. In comparison to Amorim, where Amorim now we understand his salary is about £6.5 million pounds a year at Man United. We didn't have the the buyout clause to deal with, the 10 million euros. But then it didn't stop there, did it? Because obviously it's just a buyout clause for him. But then along came, Amorim's entourage. We would have had to buy them out of their contracts as well. So it's also known that the board favoured Lopetegui because of his wealth of experience, including his stint as manager of Wolves that Amorim didn't have. For whatever reason, West Ham will always insist, or David Sullivan will always insist on having a manager that's got some level of Premier League experience. Now, it's been proven quite a few times by several other teams, Brighton, Bournemouth, one or two others, that you don't need, Arne Slot at Liverpool, you don't need Premier League experience in order to succeed. What you need is a good infrastructure at the club for a head coach to succeed. And then you have the other arguments that apparently Amorim was only using West Ham to push Liverpool into offering him the job because they were looking for a replacement for Jurgen Klopp at the time. And apparently the other story that Amorim didn't like West Ham's project that was proposed to him, and so on and so forth. So now we know, should I say, have a head coach who, up until Saturday, I was saying, let's give him some time, let him settle in. He's got new players that he's got to deal with. He's also got to get the existing players to understand a new way of playing at West Ham United. And I said, let's see. I'm always that kind of, sit on the fence type of bloke who wants to see how it goes rather than sort of like, make a knee-jerk decision on either player or manager, coach, whatever. But I think now, after seeing what happened at being there and seeing what happened at the Nottingham Forest game, I'm not so sure I'm of that same opinion now. Now, ironically, when Lopetegui's team news broke, I initially said, okay, he's going for a back five or a 3-5-1-1, 3-5-2, or a 3-4-3, whatever. He's going for a three at the back with wing back systems, etc. And if you recall, when I did the preview, and I've spoken about it before, I was saying that maybe that with the kind of players that we've got available to us or to Lopetegui, maybe a three at the back probably suits us more. Well, how wrong am I? This is why I do this, and I don't manage a Premier League football team. A few players were missing. Areola was missing because he picked up a knock in training, or so we've been told. And Souček was missing because of his illness. And we know that he's ill because he even tweeted, I thought, or whatever social media channel he's on, he said, I couldn't help the team today because I was ill, but I'll be back soon. So Lopetegui was kind of restricted somewhat to the players he had available. I do think if Souček had not been ill, Souček would have started on Saturday. We were missing a massive gap yet again in the middle of the park. So he was restricted. But when you play either a 5 or a 3 at the back with a wing back system, etc., then the idea is that you fill out your midfield and make it more combative in there, and then you get the ball to your target man. But hang on, the one thing he seems to do right, all of a sudden he does wrong. No target man. He was on the bench, and that was Antonio. Now, don't misunderstand me. I still do believe that we should have replaced Mikel Antonio quite a while ago when it comes to a striker, when it comes to an attacking player. But he's all we've got at this moment in time, or maybe even Danny Ings as well. But if you want a target man, a bit like a Chris Wood, then you have a target man, a bit like a Chris Wood. And Antonio is kind of the closest that we've got to him. Now, that means Antonio could have just stayed in the middle, if he was picked, because it meant that you got your wing backs, they get the ball, they cross it in, etc., for your striker to sweep up on. So, but then he didn't put a target man in. So he did go for a wing back system, and then we didn't have a target man. Now, look, the first half of the game against Nottingham Forest was a little bit nondescript. It was cancelling each other out. And then, out of nothing, Dinos didn't close his player down quick enough, the Forest player. And even though we had 3 central defenders on the pitch, Chris Wood was completely unmarked to get his 8th goal of the season. He's unlikely to get an easier goal this season. We were right behind the goal, and it was like, where are the defenders? Chris Wood was just standing there waiting for the ball to be crossed in. The feeling when Forest went a goal up, to be honest, was that we weren't getting back in this. Might be lucky, might nick a goal, but we weren't, it didn't feel like there was anything that we offered in that first half to suggest that we were going to get back into this game. I think in the whole first half, we had one shot on target, and that was pretty lame as well. And then, of course, at the dying minutes of the first half, the inevitable happens. A player loses his head, and before we know it, we're down to 10 men. Now, Alvarez, I praised him last week for not picking up a yellow card against Man United and thought maybe this is a turning point. He was dropped from the team a couple of times in order to maybe sort of see the bigger picture, from the sidelines, etc. Calm him down, settle him down a little bit. What does he do? He goes and picks himself up 2 yellow cards in the first half, and we have to play the whole second half with 10 men. Now, it was such an unnecessary challenge. All Alvarez had to do, and it was obvious where the player was going. The player was not going towards goal. The player, because of the run of the ball, was all he had to do was just push him out further wide. But he lunged. Now, I'm trying to ask myself, why would he have done that? Well, when you look at the Mavropanos challenge, or the lack of challenge, when Forest scored their goal, maybe, just maybe, Alvarez thought, well, I better get in there, not let them cross another ball, just in case they score a second goal. Maybe that's what was in his mind. But the mistimed challenge, it was just so awful. And we knew it was going to be a sending off. But like I said, even before the sending off, we just didn't look like we were going to ever get back in this game. Everything Forest did in a good way, we did in a bad way. They were organised at the back. They were competitive in midfield. They have pace on the wings. And they have a front man who Santo just tells, stay in the middle, we'll get the ball to you. And that's what I was alluding to, in us having a front man. If we had just a front man and we're just told, don't worry about going out wide, Antonio, or whoever it is going to be the front man. Don't worry about that. Just stay in the middle. We'll get the ball to you. But we're not doing any of that. They played the game simple and fantastic, as opposed to our setup looking quite shaky at the back. Absolutely no composure. No competitiveness in midfield. Our wing-back system didn't work, which meant that we had no pace down the flanks and no supply to our players up front. Now, Julen Lopetegui has now had a dozen games to embed some kind of ethos, a strategy, an identity, but it simply has not happened. And I just can't see it happening, to be honest with you. I first gave Lopetegui the benefit of the doubt with changes in formation we was doing, with changes in tactics, with changes of players, etc. I was saying, he's feeling players out. He's feeling out the system. He's trying to find the best way forward. I don't know anymore, to be quite honest with you. On top of that, he's had to deal with suspensions, players being sent off, injuries, and so on. But there is a real lack of continuity at West Ham United right now. So when I praised Lopetegui for trying out new things up until now, I now believe it really is completely baffling the players, and they simply do not know what it is they're meant to be doing out on the field of play. We heard a couple of weeks back when apparently when we played against Chelsea, all of a sudden, now I don't know how true this is, but all of a sudden, last minute, Lopetegui decided to play Alvarez as a kind of sweeper, to mark players, and it was like it just didn't work, got done. And our discipline seems to have gone. So many yellow cards we're picking up and red cards now. And I just wonder if it's because of that lack of discipline or understanding and the frustration, whether that's adding to the issue. Whilst it's still early in the season, I do start to wonder whether Lopetegui's days are already numbered. We've already heard that Everton this coming weekend is a must-win game. We haven't heard must-win game yet until now. Now, if we lose against Everton, I think, he's on a very, very sticky wicket. And while it's still early in the season, I'm just asking myself, how long are the board going to give Lopetegui before they do pull the trigger if they need to? We know they don't like sacking managers midway through. They don't like getting rid of managers unless they feel compelled to do so. When Manuel Pellegrini was sacked in December 2019, he'd overseen 19 matches in the Premier League, of which he won 5, drew 4, and lost 10. So far in the league, it's 10 games this season. We've won 3, drawn 2, and 5 defeats. That's virtually half of the number of games and half of the number of wins, half the number of draws, and half the number of defeats that Pellegrini had before he was sacked. If the pattern of play continues, we've got difficult games coming up. If the pattern continues for the next 9 games, Lopetegui could win maybe 2 or 3, draw a couple, and maybe lose 4 or 5. That would just about put him, it would just about match the results Pellegrini had when he was sacked on 19 games. And I think potentially this is the target that the board are going for. They're going to probably give him another, unless, of course, we lose the next 3 or 4 games in a row, then I think he's gone anyway. But if we're picking up a result here and there, they might just give him another 9 games. And then they might pull the trigger. In comparison to, say, David Moyes, when fans were asking for Moyes to be sacked at the time when he was still in charge, there's a difference because David Moyes had built up credit in the bank. He had enough credit to sort of suggest that he would see out the season. Lopetegui doesn't have that. He doesn't have any credit in the bank. He's got to start winning. His credit will be to start winning games and start winning games continuously. And if he does that, he won't get sacked. But as I said, if his record gets anywhere near close to Pellegrini's did on 19 games, he'll be sacked at that point, if not sooner. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. I wish it was a little bit happier and brighter, but it isn't. Look forward to seeing you on the West Ham Voice Weekly on Monday night, the usual live show where you can have your say. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of you will have an awful lot to say. If you want to actually have a say on video, you can always record a short video, 2 or 3 minutes long, send it to me. I will give you the address to send it to. You send it to westhamvoice@gmail.com and I'll gladly post it up for you. Thank you all for watching. Like I said, if you're new to the channel and you've enjoyed or you've appreciated the content, then please do consider becoming a subscriber. And whether you're new, existing subscriber, or just passing through, please do hit the like button. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all very soon.